hang on, that happened to me. I never knew that is not normal. I didn't know other people didn't have to walk on eggshells around at home. So I was put on steroids and antihistamines, and I was told to just try and relax. So I meditated, and I nearly journaled myself into depression, and I was so highly strung. I completely burned out within 3 weeks after. It's only been a year, and now it's like a completely different person. So I would assume I attract a whole different group of friends, well, hopefully, that are actually supportive.
Welcome to The Story Behind the Symptoms, a podcast from Symptomatic.me. Your host is David Clark, MD, a board-certified gastroenterologist who successfully diagnosed and treated over 7,000 patients with neuroplastic pain or illness. Each episode, we dive into our guests' life experiences to uncover the deeper causes of their symptoms. By listening to their story, you will gain insights that advance your own journey towards knowledge that becomes healing.
Hello, and welcome to the Story Behind the Symptoms podcast. I am your host, Dr. David Clark, and on this podcast, we talk to people about their physical neuroplastic symptoms and where they might have come from and how people recovered from them. And my guest today is Isabelle, and I would like you to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Isabelle. I'm 38 years old, and I currently live in Ireland, and I've been chronically sick my entire life. So I have a whole heap of stories to tell and patterns I've explored. So you just say the words and I get going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always start the same way that I did in my office. I like to know when and where the symptoms began and what the symptoms were and what their pattern has been over time.
So I have spent several times a month at the doctor's essentially since birth. However, it wasn't until earlier this year that I realized that all of my illnesses have a pattern in common that makes them a neuroplastic condition. So I had read Dr. Sano's books more than 15 years ago, but I didn't think they would apply to me, mainly because back then all the case studies were mainly about back pain. And if it wasn't for other people's interviews, like on channel like yours or Raylan Agel or Dan Bulio, I would still suffer and be running from one specialist to the next. So only through realizing that the common denominator was feeling unsafe in my body, I managed to reverse my mast cell activation syndrome and severe phototoxicity within 48 hours. So through healing that and looking back at decades of other symptoms, I realized that essentially all my illnesses had the same root cause of not feeling safe ever. So for the first 34 years of my life, I tried to find an explanation through the lens of Western medicine in regards to like bacteria, injuries, or physical abnormalities, like let's say gastroenteritis must be connected to food poisoning and infection must be caused by bacterial overgrowth. And in the last 3 years, I tried to pinpoint specific traumas or events to certain symptoms. For example, German new medicine would link different conditions to emotional traumas and triggers. Let's say a rash might be due to conflict or feeling attacked. So again, trying to make logical sense of things got me nowhere because I could not embody the relevant emotions. And just like Dr. Sano's book about suppressed rage, I was convinced I don't even have rage. I never get angry. So if it wasn't for Dan Bulio's YouTube channel, I would still be stuck in my mind. And it turns out I did not need another surgery, supplement, parasite cleanse, detox, diet, biohacking device. I needed to completely change my approach to life and stop being a people pleaser. So if anyone would have told me that 2 years ago, I would have laughed them out the door and accused them of not taking me and my severe illnesses seriously. Because I was born with bilateral hip dysplasia. So for anyone who isn't familiar with that term, my hip joints weren't fully developed yet, and I needed a plaster cast every 6 weeks to stabilize my joints to help them to develop properly. And that took place from the day I was born until I was 9 months old. So due to that condition, I was not allowed to partake in PE in school, but I was told to take swimming lessons instead. And being in and out of the cold water and wearing wet swimsuits, I soon developed my first UTI, probably around age 5. So that became more frequent until I refused to go swimming altogether because the pain became unbearable and I was on a constant rotation of antibiotics and was sent for absolutely horrible investigations and procedures to exclude any physical abnormalities.
Just for anybody who doesn't know the abbreviation, UTI is urinary tract infection or bladder infection.
Yes. So one of the orthopedic surgeons then suggested instead of the swimming to try ballroom dancing instead. but the UTIs persisted. And on top of that, I would get a sore stomach more and more frequently, especially with intense nausea right before classes and also in the mornings before going to school. So that went along. By the time I was 15, I also developed bad pain in both of my knees, which stopped me from dancing altogether. So they sent me for surgery. And the surgeons explained that the reason for my knee pain was due to the wrong angle of my hips. So they done the surgery, and by the time I was 16, the stomach pain and nausea became so bad, I frequently passed out throwing up bile. That's when they found out I had gallstones, and I was sent to have my gallbladder removed. So I'm only 5'2", and I weigh less than 45 kilograms, even back at the time. So none of the doctors ever checked for stones prior to that, at that age, or mentioned they could be side effect of medication or bad nutrition. So as a result of losing my gallbladder, I developed bile acid malabsorption. Okay, chronic diarrhea. So at that stage, I'm only a teenager and I'm suffering from constant throwing up, diarrhea, and chronic bladder infections. So in school, I was known as the girl that's always sick, and some labeled me a hypochondriac, but I wasn't. That was all actually happening. So my mom and grandmother told me it's genetic and I've just to be careful and I can't live like everybody else, and they themselves were at the doctors every week. So to our family, that was completely normal behavior. So at that stage, I had been to see dozens of specialists. I had tried alternative approaches, psychotherapy, mind-body therapy. I spent thousands on supplements, acupuncture, naturopath. You name it. If it exists, I've tried it. So in my early 30s, I went overseas twice to receive surgery for my bladder for this brand new method to burn away the entire inside layer of my bladder. It's called fulguration. So the hope was I would no longer need long-term antibiotics for my 6 or more bladder infections per year. So the idea was to eradicate embedded biofilms in my bladder, which could be hosting millions of bacteria that were resistant to medication at that stage. So even after the second surgery, my UTIs were still there. But I did find some help because one of the urologists suggested that for my chronic diarrhea, I could actually take medication, so-called bile acid binders, and they were an absolute lifesaver. So it took over 20 years for a single doctor to even suggest there's medication, because up until then, everybody said it's probably just IBS and just try to meditate. So due to not finding the magic cure to my UTIs, I more or less gave up on Western medicine altogether, and I went down the rabbit hole of anything on the market of alternative practices. So detoxes, diet changes, parasite cleansers. I spent an absolute fortune and I just got sicker and sicker. So I ended up with several months of severe gastroenteritis, and I developed food allergies. I would break out in hives the size of 2 palms. My lips would swell up, my eyes would swollen shut, and I just couldn't understand it. Like at this stage, I had turned my entire life to low-tox living. I changed all my personal hygiene products to organic, only used stainless steel and glass in the kitchen. I cooked everything organic and from scratch, and I tried everything and nothing worked. Then I hired a naturopath who diagnosed me with mold illness and as a reason for my mast cell activation syndrome. So I ozonated my entire house. I swapped all my supplements to eradicate mold in case there's any ingredients that contain mold. I done regular infrared saunas. I followed a strict low histamine diet. Nothing worked. I got to a stage where I could no longer be exposed to daylight. Walking across a car park for less than 2 minutes in a t-shirt ended me up at the hospital with severe phototoxicity. That's a light allergy. So I was put on steroids and antihistamines, and I was told to just try and relax. So I meditated and I nearly journaled myself into depression, and I was so highly strung. I completely burned out within 3 weeks after. That was all last year. So I was so knocked out, I developed reactivated Epstein-Barr virus. I was bedridden for more than 6 weeks. I had a severely swollen spleen. All my blood tests came back with insanely high inflammation markers. Then I developed staph infection in both of my eyes, across my face, my chest, and in my bladder. And they put me on penicillin for nearly 8 months as a result, and my GP urged me to please take a break from work as I was running high risk of developing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, that's lymphatic cancer. So I shut down my business. I've been a self-employed massage therapist for 16 years at this stage, and I curled up in bed with severe pains, depression, light and sound sensitivity, and I thought, this is it. Like, you're 36 years old and you're completely unable to function. And during that time, I was lying in bed watching YouTube. And I came across several interviews with other people who had suffered Epstein-Barr virus, mast cell activation syndrome, bladder pain, and they all said that they had healed themselves through brain retraining and essentially changing their entire personalities. So I came across Bambulio's channel, who explained that you can only heal if your brain no longer perceives every external input as a threat to your life, i.e., your brain thinks you're not safe because everything in the world is dangerous. So he calls it perceived danger syndrome or response. I'm very much like Dr. Sano's tension myositis syndrome. And that to me made perfect sense because I have never felt safe in my entire life. So once I realized that, the proverbial penny had dropped, and I listened to all of the YouTube videos where he explains that you do not need to find a certain single event as a root cause in your life, as long as you can convey safety to your brain. Because for decades, I always thought maybe something happened when, I don't know, I was 4 or 5 years old, maybe a certain trauma or injury, and I just couldn't remember. I went to hypnotherapists and nothing came up. So when I followed his advice, within 48 hours, I was able to sit back out in the sunshine again. And my light allergy had completely vanished. Within 2 weeks, my mast cell activation syndrome was gone. I could eat anything without suffering any more hives or other symptoms. And I wondered, what if all of my illnesses from childhood were all caused by the same root cause, like not feeling safe? But why? So I started analyzing my upbringing, my family, my friendships, relationships, work ethics, and I started to see the pattern. Now, I have to tell you, I was born in East Berlin, like the former communist part of Germany where the wall was still up. So my entire family comes from generations of people having lived through several wars. They've watched their own children die due to starvation and illnesses, and most men didn't return from service, and the ones who did suffered from shell shock, or what we know as PTSD. So nobody in my family ever addressed any of those emotions. And it was mainly the women that held the family together to be strong for everybody and make sure the children will survive. So that's several generations of women who made decisions on the spot based on survival, navigating daily fight or flight response. So nobody in my family ever learns that it's safe to express emotions or needs, and you just simply followed instructions and kept your mouth shut in the hope to make it through another day. So there was no tenderness or possibility to address any conflicts or incidents. You simply got on with life and suppressed everything else. So I read about a study that families who grew up under such circumstances had a very high rate of alexithymia, which is emotional blindness. So because they never learned to identify their own feelings, they simply base everything on logic and try to explain whatever symptoms arise in their body that way. So in the case of my own family, men never had an opinion on anything and completely stayed out of any decisions in regards to raising children. And at the chance of conflict, they would just be gone altogether and take off for several hours, later on pretending nothing happened. The women, however, they were the decision makers. So you weren't allowed to ever question anything or voice any requests that didn't align with their ideas. So if they decided that something was your fault, even if you could prove your innocence, you were gaslit, physically punished, or punished through love withdrawal, treated as if you didn't exist. So I'm an only child, and I was mainly raised by my maternal grandmother and my mother, and they are both raging narcissists. So nothing was ever their fault, and you were always the one that had to suffer as a consequence. So every interaction was emotional manipulation. So I spent my entire life walking on eggshells, and if I made the wrong move or encountered them on a bad day, I was toast. So my dad or grandpa wouldn't come for help. They knew better because they'd be hiding off somewhere. So I would have to take the full brunt for everything, and I was just a victim of their mood. They would never apologize for anything. They would deflect, blame, punish, and then turn things around to put the guilt and shame on you. So every day I was confronted with, I do everything just for you, and why aren't you more grateful, and you're so selfish, and you're just doing this to hurt me, and you don't love me, and I must just be the worst mother in the world, and do you want me to kill myself? And then their partners would come and say, what did you do this time to make your mother cry again? So my body realized very early in life that the only times my mom and grandma would be nice to me would be when I was physically so unwell I literally didn't have the strength to fight back, and I needed medical attention. So in front of doctors and strangers, my mom and grandma would be like completely different people. They were kind and caring, and they came across as doing absolutely anything for the poor child. until I started to feel better. All my symptoms would ease and we would be back to square one, me having to hide or tiptoe on eggshells. So when I was 11, my parents split up and I moved in with my mum and her new partner. Because if I had decided to move in with my dad, I would have just been blamed. You love your father more than me. So as a teenager, none of my friends wanted to come round to my house to hang out anymore. They said, your mum acts very strange around them, especially when I would leave the room to use the bathroom, and she would tell them horrible things about me. And one by one, they all quit my friendship. So when I confronted her about that years later, she admitted that she was jealous that I would have other friends beside her. So my first boyfriend broke up with me when he said he's scared I might one day turn into my mother. And that was the same time my knee surgery and my gallbladder surgery happened. So one of the surgeons mentioned that gallstones can form from intense grief. So I slowly started to see the patterns there. So by the time I was 19, I moved to New Zealand on my own, literally the furthest away I possibly could. Both my parents took that very personal, but I just had to get out of there and save myself. But ironically, I didn't get away from my symptoms because every single relationship or friendship I got into had the exact same dynamic as I had with my family. So that I always gravitated towards narcissists or emotionally abusive people where I had to walk on eggshells to navigate my daily survival.
Yeah, I just want to briefly comment on that because it is very important that when you grow up and you are completely focused on the needs of one or more of the adults in your household and trying to do everything you possibly can to meet their needs, it just becomes natural to do the same thing with your close personal relationships, to be involved with people that have needs or have problems or are narcissists themselves, so that you are feeling like it's your job to focus on providing for those people, meeting their needs, solving their problems. That just feels like what a normal relationship is. And many of my patients, their close personal relationships are with people like that, one after the other. I mean, they may realize after a period of time that the individual they are currently with is not good for them, is toxic, is requiring much more giving on your part than you are receiving back. And so you break up with that person only to choose a similar person for your next close personal relationship.
Because when you're in it, you can't see it.
Yes, I mean, it feels completely normal. And the self-esteem that people have who have grown up in environments like yours is very poor. And, you just feel like second-rate or worthless human being. So the idea that you deserve to be in a relationship where the other person is giving back to you just as much as you are giving to them, that is, you don't feel worthy of something like that. You don't feel deserving of a person like that in your life. And it can take a very long time to decide that you do deserve somebody like that. So I just wanted to comment on that because it's very, very common amongst my patients. Also, the whole idea of taking your emotions and burying them, that emotions that a child in your environment would be experiencing every day, including a lot of negative ones, anger, fear, shame, grief, guilt. Those emotions were not going to serve you well in that environment, so naturally you bury them somewhere.
Oh, I didn't even know I had them. I was like, I'm not an angry person. I was always just people-pleasing out of fear of the backlash, really.
Absolutely. And, that's what alexithymia is. You have buried the emotions so well that you don't even know you are having them. And they need to manifest themselves somehow, and so they express themselves via your body.
It'd be nice if somebody gave you a handbook in advance saying, you get a headache, this is because you had anger at work or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's at the ATNS, we are working toward the day when this is common knowledge, when everybody knows this, especially healthcare professionals are aware that your mind can do this to your body, that in fact these physical symptoms are a form of language by which the mind is trying to communicate that it is in a state of distress and fear and lack of safety.
And no boundaries, really. Like, same at work. I always overextended myself and never set any boundaries. And especially as a massage therapist, I always wanted to help other people, like, feel relaxed and looked after. And a lot of people took advantage of that, and they tried to get longer sessions or less money, and they just trauma dump all their problems on you. And I always provided that space for everybody else, but never for myself. So the irony in that I couldn't actually apply the same principles to my own life. But for years and years, just looking after everybody else, I mean, eventually it just had to come crashing down.
Yeah, no, that is, almost the norm among my patients, is never to put themselves on the list of people they take care of. And, sooner or later, when you are living like that, the body will protest.
And ironically, everybody I try to find help with, like friends or acquaintances, because they were used to me being a people pleaser, they were also kind of abusing that, because they know, well, if we message Isabelle, she's going to respond within a minute. She's going to have a solution for everything. And the first time in my life where I stopped doing that, like that immediate response, where I just thought, you know what, I'm not even going to respond at all. I'm going to draw a line here and set boundaries. People weren't very pleased with that. And I felt really, really guilty. But it was also very empowering. So for a while, I was like, I'm not going to respond to anybody anymore. I just want to be a hermit and sit there on my own and become a complete recluse, because every single interaction, I started noticing certain people would give me an upset stomach. Or if I talk to my mum on the phone, I might get a migraine, or I'm throwing up bile for days. And I'm thinking, did I eat something? Did I not sleep enough? Did I not drink enough water? But it was actually none of those things. It was yet again the pattern that I logically tried to figure out, but my body clearly didn't feel safe, because my nervous system still felt this isn't safe being around these people. So you need to just cut the contact and just do your own thing.
Can you think of anything that made you feel like you deserved to feel safe, that Isabelle was in fact a worthy human being who deserved to feel healthier than she was?
See, I think what I always thought was, why is nobody coming to help me? Why is nobody coming to rescue and save me? So I think even as a child, I always hoped that, well, truly my grandpa or my dad would step in, or a friend. But nobody came. So I never actually realized that that person would have to be me. So I had to get to 37 to actually cop on, nobody's coming to save me. I have to do that on my own. So that was not a pleasant experience, because I went through like meditation and journaling and trying to see it through my own body's lens. Because if I think of my symptoms as someone who's trying to protect me, that's essentially what my symptoms have done. Every time I got sick, they enabled me to like hide away and curl up, because my body knew if I'm unwell, everybody else going to be nice. So I just needed to figure out to be safe without needing the symptoms as a savior, but actually feeling worthy of it on my own, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an enormous change to feel worthy, that you deserve to feel safe. And sometimes, like you say, it's just the passage of time and journaling and thinking about these things. But sometimes people can identify a particular event or person that helped them to shift.
I think also the pattern in between several people. And I thought, whenever I tell other people that, they all had really loving parents and they're best friends with their mom and dad, and they never experienced anything like that. So if it wasn't for social media, where other people said, this is what happened to me growing up, that's where I started to see the patterns. Like,
to recognize that this is not correct, that this is actually damaging to people and creates very powerful emotions that you are unaware of.
Well, if I hadn't completely burned out last year with the whole Epstein-Barr and the staph infection and whatnot, I would still be working and I would still be people-pleasing, and I would have never actually had to stop, because I wouldn't have been forced to. I would have just dragged myself to work thinking, I'll just take some painkillers, but I can't be letting all these people down. But I never realized that who I'm actually letting down is myself. So I said I had to come completely crashing down and hit rock bottom, because otherwise I would still just go, well, sure, I just see different specialists and I get different pills for this or that. And in hindsight, if I had known all that stuff as a teenager, even already, I'm sure, even though I'm not overweight, but I'm sure if I hadn't coped with my first heartbreak or having stress with my mum by eating chocolate by the metric ton every day, I could probably still have a gallbladder. It was just too much at some stage for my body to cope, but that was just the way. I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
So,
No. So I'm curious, you went to a psychotherapist. Did they not uncover or address any of these issues?
Most of them said, well, the problem is obvious. It's your mother or your grandmother. And I was like, great, thanks. But how do I it's just the knowledge in itself. Nobody ever mentioned that it's the valuing yourself and having to feel safe, that would be what would actually make a click for me. So for years and years, I thought, well, maybe it's something my mom said or my grandmother punished me by locking me out in the hallway. Maybe that day, I don't know, if something snapped. But that never really changed anything. So none of them ever mentioned, even the mind-body therapists at the time, they said, oh, some people get, I don't know, eczema or asthma, and it's because of the grief, because it sits on the lungs. But that knowledge in itself, I mean, it's great to know, but that didn't actually shift any of my symptoms.
Yeah. Well, it's something else that we are working at the ATNS to help mental health professionals become more familiar with the kinds of issues that can make people physically ill and be able to intervene successfully to alleviate those symptoms.
What does it offer me? Presence or painkillers. Or maybe you're just a bit dramatic because you're a girl. So you immediately just get dismissed like, oh, well, it's probably just making that up.
Yeah, and this is exactly why TNS exists, is to help the mental health community do a vastly better job than that, because that didn't serve you at all.
No.
I mean, some of us, we still, for certain people, prescribe antidepressants, but never as the sole treatment. Just as a form of support while we're working through other issues. So I'm curious about where you are today. Are you able to take time for your own joy? Because that's a very important prescription that I give people, is you need to go out there and do something that has no purpose but your own joy. Are you able to do that?
I think what stopped me at first was thinking, oh God, what if I overdo it? And then I get sick, and then it's like, I haven't had the time to sink in yet. But I haven't been back to work yet in a whole year. And I've had clients saying, are you coming back yet? I'm like, no, I'm actually, at the moment, I'm really enjoying not having to be anywhere or not having to have an appointment in my books, and I can sleep in, and I'm reading 2 or 3 books a day. I love reading. So when the weather is nice, now that I can actually be exposed to sunshine again, because for a while I thought that's it, my life's over, I can never go outside again. I really love just sitting outside when the weather's nice and with a book. And I do like those micro meditations where it just takes 12 seconds just to remember. I just drop my shoulders and I take a deep breath into my belly, and I feel the wind on my skin, and I look around and I have my pets there, and I'm nearly reluctant to going back to the normal grind because I'm scared I might fall back into those patterns where I forget all my knowledge again and I start coming down with symptoms. So it's still, I haven't had a UTI since February now, so that's over half a year. That's the longest I've ever been in my life without needing any antibiotics for that. And my stomach is behaving as well. But whenever I visit my family, I'm on the phone to them, I'm still getting the pains. But at least this time I know it's not related to food or anything. This is just a mind-body issue. So usually within 2-3 days, I can come round again. So I need to remember, I need to enjoy myself and distract myself and not be with what makes me so miserable. So unfortunately, I had to cut off a lot of contacts. And I'd like to say it's nothing personal, but maybe it is.
Well, yeah, setting boundaries is extremely important, and setting boundaries that are strong enough and limit the exposure to the toxicity so that you can remain healthy is very important. And it's a form of self-care, just as taking time for your own joy is a form of self-care. For many of my patients, learning how to play is an essential human skill. Being able to take time that has, there's no goal to it.
Yeah, no guilt, I think.
No guilt. Yes, very important, no guilt. Because all you're doing is taking care of yourself in the same way that you used to take care of everybody else.
I always felt really guilty even just taking holidays from work. And if somebody would request saying, can you come on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, I would literally say, oh, yep, sure, I can arrange that, because I would feel guilty if I would even just take a day off, or I would feel scared if I go into town. What if they bump into me at the shop and they say, all right, Isabelle isn't working. What's she doing here? Is she going to a restaurant, or is she doing something? And I was like, oh, no, I can't do that. So for 16 years, I didn't do any of that. So on the day I was off, I would literally just stick to my chores, do my laundry, do the grocery shopping, and just hide away out of like fear that somebody might say, you can't be out here, you're supposed to work. So I think unconsciously, the only time I literally allowed myself off was when I was physically so unwell. I literally could not manage to get into work. And then I thought, but I have a legit excuse to say to people, oh, sorry, I can't come in today because I'm lying in bed. And then I nearly thought, what if they want to see proof? No, maybe they're lying. And what really was curious for me to see the amount of clients who would cancel me for bizarre reasons or excuses they'd make up. And then I'd see them on social media doing something else, and that never even took a wrinkle out of them. And I thought, why can't I be like that and just say, I can't make it today? I always thought I have to justify with some really mysterious illness, and I can't just say, you know what, I can't make it today. I think I need to incorporate a bit more of that, but it makes me feel really mean if I do that.
Yeah. And well, now when you've taken a whole year off, I mean, what a change that is for you.
I've been hiding behind the whole well, sorry guys, I've been sick. But they don't know that for the last half a year, I've been actually better than I've ever been.
Yeah. I think once you master the skill of playing, then you will have that skill the rest of your life. And whenever the stress level from work gets to be too high, you will now have this skill that you can use where you're going to say, I'm stopping, I'm taking a holiday, and you can do it without guilt. It's one of the concepts that's learned by a child in a toxic environment, is that in order to keep the toxicity of the childhood environment down, that they have to work and work and work and pay attention to all the details and always be focusing on the needs of the others in their environment until their bodies just force them to stop. And so now you have a completely different way of dealing with levels of effort that are too high. You just say, I'm going to stop. I've had
this little kids do sometimes, where they trace raindrops on the window, or they lie in the grass and they watch tiny little beetles just from up close. And it's like, oh, what an exciting time outside in nature. And I think that really helped me, stepping away from news and radio and social media and literally just leaving my phone away for 16 hours or longer and just sitting outside and watching tiny beetles just walking over the grass. Something so simple, but just to actually bring you back to the now. Because essentially, if I make it into work that day or not, the world doesn't stop because of that. I'm not performing heart surgery or anything. If I need to cancel somebody, they do it with me all the time. So why am I taking that so seriously? I think I just got so caught up. I forgot that there's a whole wide world out there that you can actually experience through a whole different lens, rather than just, oh no, I'm just everybody's slave.
Yeah. And when you look back at everything that you had to overcome, another way to look at that is to say, if Isabelle can work through all of those difficulties, then she's actually quite a valuable person. And a person as valuable as that absolutely deserves to take care of herself without guilt.
See what actually comes to mind in that regard, because I always had that underlying need. I need to help everybody else. I tried to nearly force my own insights on others because I thought once they know this is going to help them. But I was surprised that a lot of people don't want to be helped. They just want to be pitied and they want to stay in that victim role. So I could offer them 23 solutions on a day at work and they go yeah, but no, that doesn't apply to me. It's probably something else. And that just frustrated me because I thought, but I want to help you. I want to make you feel better. But I had to learn, I can't do that for anybody else. If they want to do that, they have to do it on their own. The only thing I can do is look after myself.
Yeah. And
if somebody else,
by talking to them, yeah, you've planted ideas for them. You've let them know that there's the possibility of another way to live. And sometimes that idea will bear fruit 6 months, 12 months later. They will start to think about, and make the change that you made, that you finally decided after you had, truly hit kind of a rock bottom, that you were going to live a different way, and you found another solution. I'm curious, and this happens not right away for a lot of my patients, but have you had any new personal relationships that are part of this change in your life?
Right now, I've literally cut everybody off. I'm a complete hermit. I'm not at the stage yet of even going out. Like, I'm making appointments to talk to my parents on the phone. So that's already one big thing. But so far, I'm still in the cutting off phase rather than letting new people in, because I think right now, all I see are red flags everywhere. So the second somebody, I don't know, doesn't respond straight away or just doesn't care, I think I deserve better than that. I don't want a friend like you anyway. So I think I need a couple more weeks to let that filter and actually allow other people in to.
Yeah, it's a major, exactly. I deserve better, people worthy of my time. Those are enormous changes in personal self-image and attitude and belief. And in my experience, what that leads to is relationships that are balanced, relationships that are mutually supportive, where you get back from the other person what you are giving to them. On any given day, it may be that you are giving a lot to them, depending on their need, but on a different day, it's your turn and they are giving to you. Many of my patients, without even necessarily looking that hard, once they have the internal change in their beliefs about their own value, these completely different sorts of people start showing up. Yes.
I actually noticed that since I've been putting up boundary, a lot of more people actually showed interest in, like, oh, we should hang out more. I was like, actually, no. It's nearly like, because they can sense that you're doing better and you're feeling better and you might be looking better, they suddenly say, oh, we must catch up. And it's like, no, actually, no. I could see last year, for example, just before I shut down my business, I had really bad tinnitus, like the ringing in my ear, and my hair was falling out in clumps. And I thought, oh my God, I couldn't even go outside without like blue light blocking glasses and earplugs. And it's only been a year and now it's like a completely different person. So I would assume I attract a whole different group of friends, well, hopefully, that are actually supportive, that I never have to get back to those old patterns again.
Yes, I mean, the kinds of people that need you to supply 95% of the energy in the relationship. With the new you, they're not going to be that interested because, Isabelle is no longer supplying 95% of the energy. So I'm not going to be that interested in Isabelle anymore.
What have you done to the old Isabelle? Like,
That's right. Where did she go? I used to like her.
Yeah. Well.
Too bad. Yeah. And so many of my patients, once they have, like I say, undergone this internal shift, completely different kinds of people begin to show up.
Yeah, my family isn't really a big fan now, I have to admit that. Because whereas I started seeing certain patterns and I even brought them up with my mom, and she's like, I told my therapist about that and he says, I'm not the problem. I'm like, oh God, here we go. So I can't make her see. I mean, I'm not saying she did what she did on purpose. She was just as much a victim of her own upbringing like I was. But the fact that there's never any responsibility or anything made me think maybe there's no point trying to explain it to her. The easiest and the best thing I can do is literally just step away and do my own thing rather than try and force it.
It's part of constructing the boundary is realizing how far it can go. And I don't blame parents. The vast majority do the best they can, and sometimes the best they can is frankly not very good. But it's because these issues come from previous generations. And they, suffered themselves. And so when they do the best they can, it ends up not being very good. But if you are able to understand where these things came from, you can make the changes that you have made, and you will be stopping the cycle. You will be stopping
almost worse, because I can see it from their point of view and I feel really bad for them. But I can't change. I can't take the responsibility for them to go and change it and talk through it themselves. So I can't just make excuses for their behavior either. So
that's right. Okay. Well, you explain this extremely well. In my office, I would ask people to tell me their story, and then I would be quiet and just listen to them. In this podcast, usually I have to ask a lot of questions to get all of the information, but
I just ran away with it.
you told your story in a very comprehensible way and explained not only all the symptoms, which were incredibly diverse, by the way. I mean, even the UTIs, the urinary tract infections, there's a good chance they were not from an infection, but were simply bladder spasm caused by a neuroplastic process. All of the things, you had reactions that you thought were for mold, you had hives, you had hair falling out, you had gallstones. The gallstones may or may not have been causing any symptoms. The symptoms you described in relation to the gallstones were not the usual ones, let's put it that way. But it just shows the power of the brain to produce symptoms all over the body and a whole variety, not just pain, lots of other symptoms as well. And it also shows the shortcomings of both the medical and the mental health system, that the condition that you had, neuroplastic symptoms, that affects at least 20% of the adult population, double the number of diabetics that are out there. And yet the healthcare profession is not capable of doing appropriate diagnosis and treatment for this, and that you pretty much had to find it yourself. And it took you 30 years to find it. Whereas, if you'd actually had a problem from gallstones or from another biomedical condition, it wouldn't have taken you 30 days to have a physician find the right diagnosis and apply the appropriate treatment. So that's something that we're working hard on, is to narrow that gap down so it goes from 30 years to 30 days for people.
I think a giveaway for the mind-body symptoms was, I read somewhere that what happens a lot is that none of those symptoms ever happen at the same time. And that was a funny thing for me, because I always knew whenever I had stomach issues, my bladder would currently be okay. Or if I had a migraine, I might get a rash. And that's always just one thing left and another thing came up, or it was just traveling pains. And that's when I was like, hang on, if that was actually like a certain infection, surely that wouldn't just go like within hours and then it pops up somewhere else. So that's when I started to cop on, like, something's not right here.
Yes, and that should be a giant clue for medical professionals, but too many medical professionals are taught that symptoms, pain, illness come from organs and structures. And they will just go drive themselves crazy trying to make a person's symptoms fit with a biomedical explanation. If they were just aware, which is what I teach all the time, if they were just aware that your brain can do these things to a person, and that there are ways to investigate that and uncover the issues and treat it, it would make such a difference. But I'm delighted that you found your way to these concepts and that they have worked for you so successfully. And from listening to you describe the pathway you've been on for the last year, it sounds to me like you're doing everything right, and that you are going to master the skill of self-care, and that you are going to re-enter the world and stop being a hermit with the idea that you deserve to be treated as well as anybody else. And that belief, when it becomes a core assumption of who you are, will change all your personal relationships for the better. And whenever your symptoms crop up again in the future, you will know that it's just your mind trying to communicate with you.
Yeah.
And you can use it as a way of understanding what's happening in your life in more depth and detail, and be able to take steps.
Because when I go on outside or use public transport, I would get a bad gut and I think, oh, why are you doing this to me? I can't rely on you. But it was actually saying, I think I'm not okay with doing this. But nobody ever explained to me, if you have constant high cortisol, you can't digest your food. And I mean, your stress levels are through the roof and your inflammation markers are up. Of course, everything is like, you're picking up everything out there, but nobody ever mentioned that. So I just thought, I can't eat anything before I leave the house because my body is going to betray me again.
And the symptoms are actually just trying to communicate that the mind is in a state of distress and that it's trying to tell you, please, look at this, investigate this, try to figure out what I am in distress about. Yes. Yeah. That's what pain always is. If you sprain your ankle, your brain takes the damage signal, not a pain signal, but a damage signal, and it determines that you are going to feel pain in that ankle as a way to help the ankle to be safe and to heal.
Put weight on it.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have any questions for me or anything else that you wanted to share that you haven't up to now? Because this has been a wonderful conversation.
I think that's pretty much it. Symptoms-wise, I think it's a pretty long list. No, I think I'm good for now. The thing is, whenever something crops up again, I have a whole different mindset to it now. At first, I was like frantically thinking, oh no, what did I eat? Or what did I say to somebody 5 days ago? Now I know it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who I had a fight with. All that matters is I'm safe within myself and I can trust myself. And if that means I just go lie down, have a nap and tell myself I'm okay and I have to hug myself, if that's what makes it work, I mean, that's so much better than constantly relying on a cupboard full of medication and thinking, what if the hospital's shut wherever I need to go? Like for years, I wouldn't go out anywhere thinking, if there's no doctor at hand, I can't possibly go out because I might fall apart. But there's so many civilizations out there of people that they live just fine. They never heard of half the stuff I've gone through. They don't think, can I go into cold water to go for a swim because I might get a UTI? It's just a self-fulfilling prophecy of thinking, this isn't safe, I better not do this or else I'll end up in bed again. I think pushing through the trigger and actually doing it regardless and knowing I've got me and I don't need anybody else. But if I do, I probably just have to learn how to ask for help, even if that's emotional support.
No, and every time you succeed, it gives you evidence that you are on the right track.
Last time we could do that, so we can do it again.
All right. Well, we should mention that Isabelle has her own YouTube channel. If you want to hear more about her story, Isabelle Alchemy.
Yes.
ALCHEMY is out there. So thank you so much. And
thank you for having me.
I know everybody who sees this will benefit.